In this video, I'm going to share 10 best practices for Toastmasters hybrid meetings. Hybrid meetings combine in-person and online participants into a single unified meeting experience. In principle, it looks like this, and in practice, it looks like this. There are a lot of tables in Toastmasters hybrid meetings. So we're going to walk through these 10 best practices that I have learned in my Toastmasters Club, which is Basel International Speakers in Basel, Switzerland. Let's jump straight over to tip number 1, and that is to use a simple setup for your hybrid meeting. I think this is key, at least especially if you're starting with hybrid meetings. So what does a simple setup mean in practice? Well, instead of going into details about all the gear you could use, which can happen very easily because we can get caught up in this idea that you need a lot of expensive gear. Let me offer you with the following 6 points for what your gear needs to be able to do. You need to have a microphone to pick up the audio in the room. You need to have some loudspeakers so that the people in the room can hear the online participants. That's 1 and 2. 3 and 4 are video. You need a camera in the room to show the in-room participants to the online participants, and then you need a video screen of some kind to show the online meeting to the in-person participants. Then you need a device to run it, like a laptop, and a high-capacity internet connection as well. And so what is the bare minimum for running a hybrid meeting? Well, the device that has all of those 6 requirements is a laptop, and you can run a hybrid meeting with just a laptop. And I've done it for some of my committee meetings. Actually, on that table that you see here behind me, we ran a committee meeting for 7 people. 5 of them were here in my apartment in person, and 2 of them were online, and we used just a laptop. But of course, we're going to share some more details here as well for the technical setup. And when people ask me, like, what is a good core setup? This is my answer right here. So I'm going to quickly put that full screen for you so you can see what we're talking about. From left to right, we have a projector to make sure that the Zoom meeting is visible in the room. Then we have the laptop, and the laptop actually has a couple of different purposes. It's being used to run the meeting. It's connected to the projector via that cable to run the projector. It also runs the audio because that conference speakerphone that we'll get to, it's connected to the laptop. And then the last feature, or the last function rather, of the laptop is to run, we use it as a camera. So that laptop built-in camera is pointed at the speaking area, which is in the left portion of this image. So this is what I think is the kind of core minimum of a good hybrid meeting setup. The actual setup that I use is a little bit more complicated, but this is a great place to start. So keep your setup simple. That's my first tip for excellent Toastmasters hybrid meetings. If you want to find out all the gear that I'm using, they're actually linked in the description below the YouTube video. The way you open up the description is that you click show more if you're watching this on a computer. And if you're watching this on a phone, you just click the little down arrow next to the title. And in that description, there are lots of other resources for you as well that are going to help you run your hybrid meetings. One of them is this hybrid meeting checklist that I put together. You can also get it at markuspresents.com/hybrid checklist. So that's linked down there. And if you want to buy a t-shirt like this, there's a link to that as well. Let's move over to tip number 2 for Toastmasters hybrid meetings, and that is to keep the administration light. What I mean by this is that I don't think we should have, I think we should not spend a lot of time fiddling around with Zoom, like pinning speakers, changing gallery mode, speaker mode, and all these things. I think we should keep the administration as light as possible. Ideally, what I prefer is to kind of set it and forget it. Start the meeting on the laptop, connect all the things, and then just do the meeting. Focus on the communication skills and the leadership skills that we're actually trying to bring or build, and keep the administration very light. I was doing a workshop the other day for some fellow Toastmasters in California for District 4. And in the Q&A, somebody asked me, do you think that we should have 2 sergeants at arms in our meeting, one on the Zoom part and one in the room? And my intuitive answer was, no, I think we should have 0. Like we should not have anybody who's kind of actively managing the meeting during the actual meeting. Because if you set it up correctly, then it kind of runs itself. Maybe that was a little bit of an exaggerated response from me, but the principle still stands. Keep your administration as light as possible and focus on the communication aspects. But happy to hear your experiences if you're running Toastmasters hybrid meetings, how you actually solve it with these roles. Do you have additional roles or not? And I know some districts have also created like hybrid czar roles as well. Let's move over to tip number 3, and that is ensure that every Toastmasters role is location independent, meaning specifically that every role can be done both online and in the room. And it may be easy to think that some roles always have to be done in the room, for example, Toastmaster of the evening, but it's not correct at all. If you work on this, you will definitely make sure that you build an inclusive meeting where every Toastmasters member in your club can enjoy the full benefits of the meeting, regardless of how they choose to join. And in the way we run our club at the Basel International Speakers, it is not the case that some members are always online, some members are always in person. They can actually choose how they want to join. And one benefit of this is that, for example, if somebody is running late at the office and they were planning to come to the physical meeting, they can just join online instead because it is a hybrid meeting. So make sure that all of these roles are location independent. One of them is quite tricky, and that is the timekeeper role. I'm actually going to have a whole separate bullet point about that later on how to do the timekeeper role in a hybrid meeting, because that can be a real challenge. So these first tips here were kind of the principles that I use to build my hybrid meeting, and the next several tips are going to be more practical, like specific meeting processes that we want to run through. If you enjoy this kind of free training right here, you can buy me a coffee by going to buymeacoffee.com/MarkusPresents. It's a great way to make a small donation if you're getting value from this kind of training. And that link is also in the description. Let's move over to tip number 4, and that is to create an accessible agenda. And this is a bit of an interesting point because we've obviously had different ways of delivering the agenda, whether we were on Zoom or in person. And in our in-person meetings, we always had a physical agenda, like a paper agenda that we print out. That would typically be the task of the Vice President Education. But if the Vice President Education is not in the physical room, how are they going to bring the agenda? So this is when I got this idea of making it accessible and making sure that we treat everybody the same. Regardless of how you join, you should be able to access the agenda. And here is my solution. I've created this QR code and shortcut on our website, which means that I will just display this on the Zoom meeting, and people can just scan that QR code with their phone, whether they're joining that meeting online or if they're joining it in person, because this is going to be shown on the screen in the room as well. But I want to take it one step further, because as you see here, this has some features. And well, the main feature is that it has the video on one side, and then it has the agenda on the other side. So I'm just going to briefly share my Zoom screen with you to show you kind of a simulation of how this can look in a hybrid meeting. So I'm going to put that on the screen there. And you can see here on my Zoom screen that I have kind of two roles here. I have the in-room feed, and then I have the audience feed. Okay, it's actually the speaker feed and the room feed. And I'm even going to just quickly activate my camera here on my phone so that we can get that second angle. There we go. Let's put this full screen for just a moment. Now, this is how it would look inside of Zoom. So on the left-hand side of the image, we have the speaker camera view, and on the right side of the image is kind of a camera that's coming from the side. And even though I'm displaying that visual in my speaker feed, it doesn't cover the whole feed, and I think that's super important, because then we can still keep a view of the speaker actually there. Hey, let me know if this is valuable to you. Let me know in the chat if this is a cool way of showing the agenda. So the idea here is to actually not show the agenda, but show them a link that they can easily find it. Let's quit that. I'm going to deactivate my Zoom camera there and stop that screen sharing for now as well. So that is something that I would recommend, is to set up an easy way to access the agenda that is the same for everybody. Let's move over to tip number, there was one thing I forgot to say about the agenda. So the system we use to manage our agenda here at Basel International Speakers is EasySpeak, which is the unofficial Toastmasters agenda management system that we use mostly here in Europe. It's a super powerful system, and that link that I created there, that actually goes always automatically to the next meeting's agenda. So I don't have to update that QR code or anything like that. So that's a great way to manage the agendas. And EasySpeak these days also does handle hybrid meetings, so you can set it up as a hybrid meeting so that people can join online or not. Hey, I hope you're getting value from this. And if for some reason you're not a Toastmasters member, that the last bit maybe doesn't make any sense. But listen, I'm happy that you're here joining us for this live stream. And we're gonna do 5 more tips, and then we're gonna do questions and answers. We have a lot more content planned. So I hope you're getting value from this. Smash the like button if you are. So let's move over to the next point. And the tip number 5 here is to explain what is different. I think anybody who has run a hybrid meeting knows that there are some differences compared to a normal meeting. And regardless of what you consider a normal meeting, if that is an in-person meeting or an online meeting, hybrid meetings are difficult, and there are things that are different. So what I found to be a great best practice is to explain those things that are not obvious, and also keeping in mind the two kind of sides, the online participants and the in-room participants. So let me show you quickly the layout that we have. Here's an older photo of my hybrid meeting layout. You can see it's based on the same kind of print. I'm going to put it full screen. So in addition to the laptop, the projector, the conference speakerphone, and the phone that we saw before, there is one more thing. There's the main camera pointed at the stage. And I realize now that I actually forgot to explain half of my setup. So I'm going to do it right now because the components are the same. So the point of that mobile phone, which is located at the bottom left of the screen, the point of that is to add a second camera to the room so that the people joining online can not only see the speaker, but they can also see the audience, which is important for that inclusion. And then the last piece of that puzzle is that conference speakerphone, and that I use these days a device called PolySync 20, which is the newer model. It's also linked in the description below the video. And in this photo is the Polycallisto 7200, which is the older model. Both of them great products, actually. So that speakerphone serves as both audio in and out for your hybrid meetings. So what I was trying to say here is to explain what is different. So what is actually different about this? Let me share one idea. In this image, I'm actually, if I'm the speaker or the president, as I am, I'm standing at the bottom right-hand corner of this image. I'm standing next to that lectern. That's how we set it up. The laptop is all the way over there on the other side of the room. And what that means in practice is that when I'm using this setup, I cannot access the laptop, which means I cannot access the chat. And this is one of those things that is not obvious to the people who are joining online, because they are sitting at the laptop. They're sitting with the chat right there. But I have to tell them explicitly that we cannot access the chat in our setup. Here's another example. So that's a kind of an explanation for the online participants. Here's an explanation for the in-room participants. When we use a conference speakerphone like these Poly devices here, it's very sensitive, and we're constantly unmuted. This is also unusual. We have to have the microphone on all the time because we're in the room, and we can't be switching it on and off because we don't have these individual microphones. So what that means is that if you whisper in the room, it's going to pick it up, and then it's going to disturb the people online. Once again, not obvious, because it's not something that, because you may be used to the idea that you can whisper to the person next to you. Another example of this is that when people see that conference speakerphone on the table there, they might think that if they're on the other side of the room, they have to shout in order to be picked up. It's not correct. These conference speakerphones are designed to be heard, even if you're speaking from a distance. So the instructions that I always give, remember that we can't use the chat, don't whisper, and don't shout. And I encourage you to think about what are those differences that are not obvious, especially taking into consideration the two different perspectives that we have in our hybrid meeting. I'm going to move over to the next point here, and that is going to be tip number 6. And the card here, it says thought of the day. So what is thought of the day? This is a practice that we have in our club, which I find to be a great icebreaker slash warm up technique. And what it is that at the beginning of the meeting, I ask everybody who's there to say their name and then share one thought of the day, 20 seconds. This may sound weird. If you're running a meeting that is only 1 hour, maybe there is not time for this, but our meetings are typically 2.5 hours. There's a break. So we have a little bit of more time to do this. So why is this relevant for hybrid meetings? This exercise, thought of the day, is a great way to make sure that everybody feels included. So at the beginning of the meeting, when I go around and ask everybody for their thought of the day, that's a great way to make sure that everybody gets heard. And sometimes it can happen that it's easy to forget the people who are joining online if there's fewer of them. So with thought of the day, I can make sure to prioritize them. I can ask them first. I've also overcorrected on this. For example, I went through everybody who was online, and then I asked, did I forget anybody? And everybody in the room raised their hand because I had actually forgotten everybody in the room. So what I do these days is that I actually have the list of all the participants in front of me on a phone. And then I make sure to go through everybody on there. But still, more than half the time, I forget something. But hey, this is how it is with hybrid meeting these days. We are learning to do this. Let's move over to the next point. Actually, one more thing about a thought of the day, just as a cool exercise, because one thing that it guarantees is that everybody speaks, and everybody speaks early. And this includes guests. I don't like these. I don't like kind of special introductions of, for example, the officers. I'm the president, but I don't want to be treated anywhere. I don't want to be treated any other way than anybody else. This is a great equalizer. Thought of the day is a great way to make sure that everybody is on the same playing field, in my opinion. I'm originally from Sweden. I have these kind of egalitarian ideas. Okay, we're getting off track, guys. We have to move over to the next point. But listen, if you're getting value from this video, hit the like button. It's completely free. It's right there. It's beautiful. Next point is going to be tip number 7, and that is to use visible timing cards. Now, you may think that sounds a bit obvious. Yeah, obviously I cannot use invisible timing cards, but this is a point that is quite challenging. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this one than the others. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do it, and just to kind of highlight the challenge that we have with timing cards. And for this, firstly, I'm going to go back to my Zoom meeting here, and I'm just going to add myself to the Zoom meeting. And in just a moment, I'm going to add that to the stream as well. So here's our Zoom meeting. And one way to show timing cards is, obviously, if you're online, you can do it in the same way that you've always done it with, for example, holding something physical up to the camera, which might be something like this. This might be the orange card, and you hold that to the camera. But in a hybrid meeting, you cannot do this, because this camera, this is going to be the speaker camera. And if I'm the timekeeper in the meeting, I cannot walk up to the stage and hold up the timing card to that main camera. Well, I can, but it's not ideal. So the reason why I have this set up with 2 different cameras for this demonstration is that I actually recommend that you hold the camera up to the secondary camera, which I have here to my left. The problem with this is that if I put it quite close, which it should fill the whole screen, but it can look a little bit red instead of orange because of the lighting. So this is a way that does work, but it is a bit of a challenge. So let me actually let's leave that on. I'm going to show you a couple of other ways that you can use timing cards in your hybrid meeting, and I think you're going to enjoy this. The first method that I'm going to use here is to do it like this. You can see here that the timing card fills the left side of the screen, but at the same time, I'm staying, like I'm the speaker in the room, right? The speaker view is staying on Zoom. So both are visible at the same time, super important in a hybrid meeting. And at the same time, you can see the second camera, this second camera here, hi, that is not obstructed by this timing card. If I were to do this with the screen share, for example, it would be obstructed, and that would not be a great experience. This is, and then I have the other, I can just show you quickly. I have the other timing cards here. We have amber, and then we have red timing card as well. And I think this is a pretty powerful way to do it in terms of showing timing cards. And I'm doing this with OBS Studio connected to Zoom. There's a link to a video where I walk you through exactly how to do it, the live stream that I did a couple of months ago. It's in the description below the video. So this is a pretty cool way to do timing cards. And I think this is also a good way to kind of approach using visual aids to do these split view with images and the video on the same screen. So that's one way to do it. I'm going to quickly switch that off and remove the screen share. So pretty powerful way to do it, and pretty easy to set up as well. But there's another way that I just quickly want to draw your attention to. Let's see, I'm going to do it like this. So that is using OBS Studio and the built-in color source and text tools. Works pretty well. Another way that I like to share timing cards is like this. I'm actually, as you see, I have these slides that I prepared, and in this slide deck, I've just added these timing cards. So these are just a part of my slide deck. I can go back to the ones that you saw before, and then I have my green, amber, and mauve wood or red. And yes, this is golden lime, I know, but I have a limited set of brand colors. So this is a pretty good way to show timing cards in a hybrid meeting as well, because it maintains this idea that you have your video on one side and your visuals on the other side. This setup is obviously a little bit more complicated, and if you want to copy this setup, which actually also has, let's switch to green. So I have this. I can take away the camera. I can go to my webcam and then go back to this view as well. And this is a little bit more complicated, but if you just want to copy my setup, I actually made it available. You can get it if you go to markuspresents.com/OBS. It's available there as a digital download and as a mini course, also linked in the description. So that was what I had to say about timing cards. It can be quite complicated, but you will figure it out as you go along, and maybe you will end up with a different system. Let me know how the system might be. Move over here to tip number 8. Tip number 8 is to reconsider your use of visual aids. We kind of hinted at it already, is that visual aids can be very tricky in a hybrid meeting, especially because people are going to have very different experiences. And let's look at a couple of examples. If I'm joining the meeting online only, or rather, if everybody is online only, everybody has a similar kind of experience. They are probably quite close to the screen. So if somebody shares, for example, a slide presentation and goes full screen, it will probably be visible by everybody. But if you are joining the meeting in the room, and I'm online, and I'm presenting online, I may not know if my slides are actually visible in the room. For example, the projector image could be very small. It could be a bad quality projector. This is actually a challenge that we have. We have a low budget projector in our Toastmasters Club, which means that fine details are not always visible. So in that situation, really reconsider your use of visual aids. Same thing if you're presenting in the room. Let's say that you have a prop that you're going to show. You're going to show something to the audience. If they're in the room, you can kind of get a good feeling for how well it's visible, but you don't necessarily have a good idea of how visible it is to the people online. For example, is it enough to hold it up like this? Or should I have to hold it up to the camera like that and wait for it to actually focus? This is one of those challenges. So I'm not saying don't do visual aids, but it is one of those communication challenges that you have to think about. How will my visual aids be perceived by the people in the room and the people online as well? Yeah, 2 more tips to go, and we're going to have some questions and answers after that. If you want more communication tips from me every Thursday, just subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Just hit the big red subscribe button. It's completely free. And we're going to move on. We're going to move on. Tip number 9, and that is to consider skipping written evaluations. And this, I know from experience, is a bit of a controversial stance. Written evaluations and written feedback in a hybrid meeting, in a hybrid Toastmasters meeting, is challenging, because especially if the person giving the feedback and the person presenting are in 2 different locations. If I'm presenting online and somebody wants to give me feedback from the room, they cannot do it very easily because they cannot use the chat. Same thing, if I'm presenting in the room and somebody wants to give me feedback, written feedback, and they're online, they cannot easily do it because they can't use chat. There are ways to get around this, but the processes that we've considered, none of them are particularly straightforward. What we actually settled with is that the sergeant at arms will, for example, take a photo of the written evaluation in the room and then send it to the speaker online. That's the method that we're currently trialing. But it's not an easy problem to solve. This is why my recommendation here is to consider skipping them and focusing on the other aspects of the meeting. I know that people love their written evaluations, but it may not be feasible to do live in the room. And then tip number 10, it's going to go even further. My tip number 10 is to eliminate voting. This, of course, varies by Toastmasters on how you do it. Typically, we have voted for the best table topic speaker at every meeting, and sometimes for the best evaluator as well, if we've had 4 or more evaluators. And in our case, we count the speech evaluators, the table topics evaluator, and the general evaluator. Those are the kind of roles that we count. But voting, for the same reasons that written feedback is difficult, for the same reasons, I also recommend skipping voting, because it is very difficult to figure out a method and a process that will be easy to implement, that will be scalable, that can be done by anybody. A lot of the answers that come up in this discussion is, oh, we'll just set up a Google form and everybody can go there, or just set up this and that app. And when you start to think about it, you need somebody to run it. You need some administration. You need somebody to actually collect the data and input the data and interpret the data. These are not problems that we have when everybody's online, because you can just send a chat message. This is not a problem that we have when everybody is in the room, because everybody can just write their thing on a note. When you're trying to combine it, I strongly recommend to skip the voting if you're doing it in your club. And listen, we're going to go over to some questions and answers from you in just a moment. But here's a reminder, you can get this free hybrid meeting checklist. Just go to markuspresents.com/hybrid checklist, and you'll be added to my email list, and you'll get updates about new live streams and new products and stuff like that. So that link is in the description, markuspresents.com/hybrid checklist. Before we go over to the Q&A session, I want to recommend one more video here on my YouTube channel, actually a playlist, because I put together a list of all the different hybrid meeting videos that I've done. And if you want to check out that playlist, click or tap the screen right here for that full playlist. And now let's go over to some questions and answers from you guys. I'm going to make a small adjustment to my setup here so I can actually see your questions. But if you have any thoughts or comments, let me know, and we'll have a little chat for sure. Just going to quickly adjust it there so that I can actually see what's going on. Just one moment. This is always the part of the stream where I kind of lose the energy a little bit because I have to make this small adjustment. I'm trying to get better. Okay, we have a comment here from Laura. That's an amazing idea for the agenda. Yes, I do like my idea for the agenda. I think it's a really solid way to distribute it to everybody. So far, it's been well received. And the fact that people can just scan the QR code in the room and they will have it in front of them on the phone is a good idea. However, on the agenda, we're still evaluating it. I do miss the paper agendas, right? There is something to be said, especially if you also need to make notes on the agenda. There is something to be said for the paper agenda, but we're trying really hard to make it inclusive and the same experience for everybody. Because one of the biggest challenges in a hybrid meeting is this feeling that it's kind of us and them. It's the online and the in-person. And whenever I can find ways of treating everybody the same in a hybrid meeting, I try to take that opportunity. Thanks for that comment, Laura. I appreciate that. Let's have a look at this comment from Shari. Let me just quickly read. We're considering having in-room folks to also have a Zoom on their devices. Okay, this is a very interesting question. We're considering having the people in the room also log in to the same Zoom meeting. My word of caution for this is that one of the things that can easily happen is that you will get audio feedback. And what I mean by that is that when you have let's say that we're using a conference speakerphone and a cell phone. There's two devices, right? The conference speakerphone handles audio in and out, and then the mobile phone handles the is the second camera, but it also has a microphone. So what can happen is that the audio from the conference speakerphone comes out and then gets picked up by the microphone on the mobile phone, and then that gets fed up back into the meeting, and you will get this audio feedback. And you might think that, okay, why don't you just mute the microphone on the phone? But it's actually not enough, because it can also happen the other way. The audio from the meeting will come out of the speakers on the phone and then be picked up by the microphone that's in the room, and then you will get exactly the same problem. The solution here, luckily there is a solution. The solution is to not mute the audio on the in-room devices, but rather to disconnect it. And there's a little menu that you can tap that says disconnect audio. If you do this for multiple devices, it can potentially work. However, there is a high likelihood that even one person will forget to do this or doesn't know how to do this. Like, most people have never seen this option called disconnect audio. It's new, right? So if there's only 1-2 people doing it, but if you have to instruct 9-10 people to disconnect the audio on their Zoom, I am pretty certain that you will get this audio feedback, and that is going to ruin the meeting. So I'm not saying don't do it. And I have tried it once in my meeting. There was one person who brought their laptop, but to set that up correctly, it took like an extra 15 minutes of support for me. So definitely experiment, but realize that is a real risk that can completely ruin the audio in your meeting. There are benefits, though, of course, because, for example, the problem that I mentioned before, that the people who are in the room may not be able to see the slides. If they have their laptop in front of them, then they can just look at it there. Oh, which actually reminds me, I have to show you that I have to give you this example. This is one of the weird things about hybrid meetings. I'm going to show this to you real quick here. Imagine in this view that I am standing here where the podium is, and then I have the Zoom meeting on the screen in the back of the room, and then I have some people sitting in those seats on the left side of the image. One of the fascinating things about hybrid meetings is that those people are not going to be looking at me when I speak. They're going to be looking at the Zoom meeting. And it is incredibly weird when I'm physically in the room and they're looking at the screen. But this is what people will do, right? It's going to happen. And especially if I'm showing any visuals. So don't be surprised when it happens that people actually are not looking at you. They're looking at the screen instead. It's super weird, but it's going to happen. So how does this relate to the current question? Well, if people bring their own devices, they're going to be looking at the screen as well, right? That's what's going to happen, and it's a fun experience, but just be ready for that. And you may find it distracting. You may find it part of the fun. Definitely give it a go. It's fun. And let me know in the comments after the video is done. After the video is after the replay is there. Let me know how that worked out. So. Definitely, for all these hybrid meeting things, we have to experiment because we're still all figuring this out. Let's move over to the next question. Okay. So let's see. This is an interesting question here. Let's put up Lynette's question. Is that we are using 2 timers, if possible, one in the room and one in the online. This is an interesting approach. I've never seen that approach. It's if it works for you, then good. I think that there are ways to make sure that the timing devices are visible to both sides. So if I am in the room, I can just hold up something to the secondary camera like this. But and my initial reaction to that is that it also like adds an extra layer of administration. But hey, that's a cool idea. I like it. Thank you for sharing that, Lynette. And this is, like I said, we're still figuring this out. Okay, let's have a look at Scott's question here. Let me just quickly read through it. We use only one laptop in the room to log into Zoom and turn off the sound on the laptop. Easy to do, yeah. This eliminates the audio feedback. Bottom line is that only one microphone. Absolutely, that is exactly the bottom line. There should only be one microphone in the room. And in our case, in my setup, it's the conference speakerphone. But I've also done it with other microphones. I've actually done it with a lavalier microphone that we set up in like a speaking area on a mic stand. I've used the built-in microphone in my laptop, and I'm going to try actually something else at our next meeting as well. So I completely agree that you have to make sure that there is only one microphone, also one set of speakers. And it is easy to do once you know how to do it. But what I found difficult is that if there's 10 laptops to instruct people to do it correctly, because people will not understand the difference between disconnect audio and mute. Or maybe I don't have as much faith in people as you do. I'm happy that that is working for you, Scott. That is excellent. Hey, that seems to be the end of our questions today. I'm just going to quickly scroll up to see if I caught all of the questions. I believe that I did. If not, you can let me know. No, I do. Okay, no, I did miss something. Okay, so Scott also says that we use the moderator to call on speakers, and they have to raise their hand. Okay, they have to raise their hand, wave it, in both in the room and online. It prevents two people from talking at the same time. Oh, what an interesting approach. So you have a moderator kind of assigning the word, so to speak. I'm happy that that works for you. For my taste, this is too much administration, right? Like I said, I want to have. I don't want anybody kind of running the meeting other than the Toastmaster of the evening who introduces people. So for me, for my personal taste, this would be too much administration. That's a great tip if that works for you as well. And eliminating that audio feedback is the #1 priority for a hybrid meeting. And if this works for you, I'm happy to hear that. Very, very cool. Thank you for sharing that, Scott. Okay, let's have a look at John's question here. John is saying that I'm having a video message, a speech to be played in our Zoom meetings together with the live session. The past experience in playing video over Zoom wasn't great. What's your advice for playing video on Zoom? The basic best practice is that when you are sharing your screen is that there's two little buttons there. And I'm just going to actually quickly have a look at my Zoom here to see what they're called so that I don't give you the, so the two buttons are, there's one that says share sound, and then there's another button that says optimize for a video clip. So when you start your screen sharing, firstly, don't share your screen, but rather share only the application that is actually playing the video, whether that's VLC Media Player or Windows Media Player, whatever it is. So share only the window and then click both of these buttons, share sound and optimize for video. And you can actually pick the sound quality as well here in that window. You can either share high fidelity stereo or mono. So that would be my experience as a starting point. If that doesn't work, then there might be something else going on. Hard to say. Let's see. But that's actually an interesting use case, because usually in a Toastmasters meeting, most of the content is delivered live. Like, we're not used to actually having something pre-recorded. But yeah, that would be a starting point for me as well. There are, of course, other ways to play media. Like in the system that I'm using here, I'm creating these visuals with OBS Studio, and then I'm live streaming this with a tool called Melon. And in Melon, I can actually add videos into the feed, and I can just quickly play it. And that works really well, and it cancels the audio immediately. Let's see if I can be clever enough to demonstrate that. Okay, I'm just going to play this 4-second video for you just to see if it works.
For your next act, Mr. Markus Seppala.
That's my old YouTube intro that I have just loaded up into my video feed here. So I think that works in this context. So if it's not working on Zoom, maybe other tools might help you. I'm certainly enjoying using Melon for that. That was a long-winded explanation. Let's go back to the chat. But I think that is actually the last of our questions here. So check out the links in the description below the video for additional resources. And I've also have links to 3 other videos about hybrid meetings and about how to create those timing cards that you saw earlier. So thank you very much for watching here today. And the final thing, of course, like I mentioned before, if you appreciate it, not that one. If you appreciate it, you can buy me a coffee at markuspresents.com. No, buymeacoffee.com/MarkusPresents. Listen, live streaming is hard. My brain is not working anymore. So that's actually a great place to end it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.